Hi, I'm Laura Nelkin. I'm a knitwear designer. I live in upstate New York in the Finger Lakes region, and I am very excited to teach you how to knit Brioche Boomerang. Brioche Boomerang is designed to get the most out of your yarn. You start at the tip with just a few stitches and work towards the border. And what that means with the boomerang shaping is you'll get an idea of how to work two-color brioche over a smaller number of stitches. And then as your stitches grow, your confidence will grow and you will become a brioche knitting pro. I absolutely love knitting brioche and I'm very excited to share this simple, fun design with you. This video will teach you everything that you need to know to knit Brioche Boomerang. We'll go over choosing yarn, we'll go over construction, we'll go over brioche basics, and then I'll work through all of the stitches with you. Brioche Boomerang only has a 2-row repeat, so once you get through the setup, you are good to go. It is very easy to teach and very fun to knit. So you do need to have the pattern to follow along with this video, and I have a link to that below in the notes. I also have timestamps. So if you are working on the pattern and you want to jump right ahead to the cast on or go back over how I do the integrated I-cord edge, you can jump ahead in those timestamps to any point in this video. So the first thing that we should talk about is yarn, because you know that is so fun and the possibilities are endless for Brioche Boomerang. Okay, I'm realizing it probably makes sense to talk about the construction before we talk about yarn, because we'll talk a little bit about the main color and contrast color. I am wearing a brioche boomerang that's knit in sport weight yarn. What's showing right now is the contrast color wrong side, and the right side has the main color, which is a solid color. I cast on right down here at the tip, and I worked in this direction until I got to the border right here. So that gives you an idea of what's happening as you knit that. Now, if we look under the camera, once I get my scarf back on and I'm all situated, let's look at a little miniature version right here under the camera. You'll see that I used my main color as my solid color, and my contrast color is some dyed in the wool yarn right there. And what's happening with brioche shaping is a brioche shaping on every right side row. You're increasing 2 stitches towards the beginning of the row, and then you're decreasing 1 stitch towards the end of the row. So you end up increasing 1 stitch on every right side row. So you're starting down here at the tip with just a few stitches, and then you can see that increase line happening right across the right edge, and then the decreases are happening up the left edge, and that again is with the right side facing. The other bit to talk about with Brioche Boomerang is I use an integrated I-cord edging. So there's this really nice, tidy little edging coming up the side of the boomerang. And on this right side, I use a double wrap stitch, 1 stitch in from the edge. And what that does is give this edge a little bit more elasticity so that it can block out into that curve that I just showed you when I was holding it up. And we'll go over how to do that on your needles. It is written into the pattern. You don't have to think about that one too much. You'll just do what the pattern says. But I think it's pretty important to understand the construction and how a boomerang is shaped. I love this construction and I love wearing boomerang shawls. I think that you are going to too. So now that we've talked about that and I mentioned the main color and the contrast color, now it is time to talk about yarn because you'll really see what I'm talking about there. Okay, talking about yarn is my favorite thing. I have a big old stash and I went stash diving to show you all a lot of options if I was to just make brioche boomerangs for the foreseeable future. But I want to tell you about the yarn that I knit my first brioche boomerang in, which was Junction Fiber Mill Making Tracks Light and Junction Fiber Mill Roots Light. The Roots Light was my main color, and that's the solid color. It was called Forest. And then the dyed in the wool color that I used, which creates that great movement of color along the boomerang, was dyed for Knit for Food 2025. And I kind of sat on the skein for a little while and then got going with this boomerang. What I want to show you under the camera is how you decide which color you want to use for your main color and which color you use for your contrast color. So I have both versions here to show you. And the one on the left, the main color is the solid color, and then the contrast color is the dyed in the wool color. And the one on the right is the opposite. The main color is dyed in the wool, and the contrast color is the solid color. What happens is whichever color you use for your main color, when you're looking at the right side, that's what makes the I-cord edging that goes up the side. So you do need to have a little bit more yarn of your main color than your contrast color. What I want you to see with brioche, which we haven't really talked about yet, is one of the cool things about brioche is that it is reversible. So if we look at these from the wrong side, now we can see that contrast color on the wrong side, and you can see the solid color over here, but the edge stitches are still the main color on both sides. So you can see that I'm actually wearing my brioche boomerang with the wrong side facing out, with the gradient yarn, the contrast color facing out. So it, because it's reversible, but if it flips around, both sides look really great. So it's almost really up to you which you like to be the edging color more. And that might get dictated by how much yarn you have to work with. Like in this example, I went stash diving and I have found a lot of great yarns. And this yarn right here on the right is from Feeder Book Farms. It's a DK weight yarn. It's dyed in the wool. And then the one on the left is from Nash Island. It's 100% wild Maine Island lamb's wool. And I know that I have more of this color than I have of this color. So if I was to do a brioche boomerang out of these, I would probably make the Feeder Brook the main color and the Nash Island the contrast color, because I could get a bigger boomerang that way. So that's one option. I love the way these two play together so well. Another option is I had some more Making Tracks light. I actually have a lot of this yarn. If I kind of pull it down so you can see the color a little better. I was thinking I could hold this together with Green Mountain Spinnery Cotton Comfort, which is one of my favorite wool and cotton yarns. And I think these would make a really, really lovely brioche boomerang together. A little more muted, a little bit more natural. This is really kind of like a sweatshirty kind of color. Those of you who've knit Lake Hug know that this is left over from that project. I've got a fair amount of it. Another fun combo that I found is this is a hand spun, hand dyed bunny yarn that I got at Maryland Sheep and Wool a few years ago. And then I had another skein of Nash Island in this great magenta. And I think that these would play very, very well together. You are going to notice as I'm showing you yarns that I'm not showing you a lot of superwash yarn. I'm showing you all yarns that have like a little bit of tooth to them, a little bit of like a fiber that grabs. And that's because brioche is a little easier to knit when you knit it in a non-superwash yarn. You can certainly knit it in a superwash yarn. It's just not going to be as forgiving. And then finally, because I couldn't resist one more in a heavier weight yarn, this is more of a, I would say, like into the worsted weight right here. On the left, I think I would use this as my contrast color. This is Ross Farms Funky. It's 100% Cheviot. It is hand dyed and milled and gorgeous. I love Amy and I love her yarns. And then over on the right, this is from Avalon Springs Yarn, and I got this yarn was at when I was at Rhinebeck 2 years ago, and it is milled with recycled sari silk in it. So you get all these like tweedy flecks of the sari silk, and I think these two play very well together. So how many is that? One, two, three, four on top of the one I've already knit. If I was just gonna knit boomerangs for everybody, I'm clearly set up from stash. I don't need to go yarn shopping. So if you have questions as you start to look at your yarn, what's very fun is you're just casting on a few stitches as you start your brioche boomerang, so you can knit a few inches and see which color you like to be your main color and which color you like to be your contrast color. You could knit two either way. That can become your kind of gauge swatch and your way of testing color, and then go ahead and block them. You'll have an idea if you want to change needle size, if you want to change out one of your yarns, but it's really easy to start the pattern and get to know with it and play with your yarn a little bit. So once you've decided on yarn, it's time to talk about brioche. For those of you who've knit a fair amount of brioche, this next section might not be necessary for you. You might want a refresher. And then after that, I jump into the cast on. Okay, let's talk about brioche. I just want to mention I thought I could shoot this whole video with my hair down, but it started driving me crazy, so I put it back. Let's get serious and do this brioche thing together. Page 2 of your pattern has all your notes and abbreviations, and I highly suggest with any pattern before you go to cast on that you read the notes page. In this case, I think it's really important that you take a moment to read that notes page. One of the things that notes page does is give a little description of brioche knitting. And basically what brioche knitting is a tucked stitch where every row has two passes along your knitting. Brioche does not need to be knit in two colors, but I think it's much easier to knit in two colors because you can see which stitches need to be worked. So basically on Brioche Boomerang, when you're working right side rows, your first pass is worked with the main color, and you'll be brioche knitting with your main color and then working a slip one yarn over on the stitches that you're not brioche knitting. And then you slide all of your stitches to the other end of your needle, and you use your contrast color to work slip one yarn overs and brioche purls. Then, when you're done with that row, you turn your work and work back on the other side, first with the main color, but the main color will be doing brioche purls, and then with the contrast color, which will be doing brioche knits. It starts to get pretty easy to see the brioche knit line and the brioche purl line as you get into working it, and then you can see those little slip one yarn overs. I find for those of you that haven't worked brioche before, the best thing to do is just kind of jump right into it. So what I'm going to do with you is show you how to work the cast on for brioche boomerang, and then work the setup rows with you, and then work the 2-row repeat. And once you have that down, you are good to go, and you are knitting your brioche boomerang. So let's go ahead and do that together. Okay, Brioche Boomerang starts with the 3-stitch cast on that I use oftentimes in my designs. So if you have been knitting my designs for the last little while, this is going to be pretty familiar to you. I'm starting with my main color, and I have about a 6-inch tail right here coming to the front. And I'm going to put my yarn over my left hand, and I'm going to cast on 3 stitches onto my right hand needle as follows. I'm going to go in right there, and you'll see I'm going in from the left to the right. And then I'm going to go underneath this yarn right here, and then around the yarn on my index finger. And now I have 2 stitches on my needle. And now I'm going to dive into that hole again and grab that yarn around my index finger one more time. And now I have 3 stitches on my needle. If you need to go back and watch that again, you can try it a few times, take it out, you'll get it. It's not a hard one. It's just maybe a little different than you've worked a cast on before. And now my next row is a wrong side row, and I'm going to purl one and then yarn over. And then I'm going to purl one and then yarn over. And then I'm going to purl one. And that is the cast on and first row, and I have 5 stitches on my needles. And now I'm going to turn my work and get ready to work the setup. Okay, I'm on setup row 1 right now, and there are going to be 2 passes, one with the main color and one with the contrast color, because we're getting set up for the brioche. So I'm going to knit one, and then I'm going to knit one through the back loop, and then into the next stitch I'm going to knit one. Sorry, that stitch is split. I'm going to make that look pretty. There we go. And then into the next stitch I'm going to knit one, yarn over, knit one, and then I'm going to knit one through the back loop, and then I'm going to knit one. And I'm going to take all of those stitches and I'm going to slide them to the other end of my needle. And then I'm going to attach my contrast color, leaving a little 6-inch tail right there. And those first 2 stitches, I am going to slip with the yarn in back. And then the next stitch is a slip 1 yarn over, which we haven't worked yet. So I'm going to bring my yarn to the front of my work. I'm going to slip that next stitch purlwise, and I'm going to bring my yarn over the needle. And then I am going to knit 1 stitch, and I'm going to slip 1 yarn over again. I'm going to bring my yarn to the front. I'm going to slip that stitch and bring that yarn to the back. And then I'm going to slip these 2 stitches with the yarn in back. And that is setup row 1, both with the contrast color and the main color. And now I am on setup row 2. And the most important thing when you're going to start setup row 2 is to make sure that your contrast color does not lie over the main color, but it stays to the left right there. And I am going to slip 2 with yarn in front, and then the next stitch is a brioche purl, which means I am going to knit that main color stitch together with that slip 1 yarn over. And now I'm going to slip 1 yarn over, so I'm going to slip 1 and make that yarn over. And now I'm going to brioche purl again, and then I'm going to slip these last 2 stitches with yarn in front. And now I'm not done working setup row 2. I'm going to slide my stitches to the other end of my needle. I am going to slip 2 with yarn in front, and then I'm going to slip 1 yarn over. And now this next stitch is a brioche knit, so I'm going to have my yarn to the back of my work. I'm going to go into those 2 stitches. It's not really 2 stitches, the stitch with the slip 1 yarn over. And now I'm going to bring my yarn to the front of my work, and I am going to slip 1 yarn over, and then I'm going to slip 2 with yarn in front. What I'm trying to be really careful of as I do this is I've knit so many of these that I can almost do it in my sleep, and I'm trying to work slowly enough so that you can really see what I'm doing. Now I'm ready to work setup row 3. I've got my contrast color all the way to the left. You don't want to have it to the right. You don't want it to cross over the main color. So I leave that to the left. I don't want it caught up in that I-cord edge. And now I am going to knit 2, and I'm going to brioche knit, and then I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to brioche knit into that same stitch. So if you saw when I worked that first brioche knit, I didn't slide the stitch off of the needle. So what I've done right there is increased 2 stitches. And now I'm going to slip 1 yarn over, and this last stitch right here is a knit 2 together. This right here counts as 1 stitch. So to knit 2 together, I'm going to work this stitch together with that stitch and its slip 1 yarn over. And then I'm going to knit the last stitch. That knit 2 together always happens right before the last stitch of the row. And now I'm going to slide those stitches to the other end of the needle. I've got my contrast color waiting for me. I am going to slip two purlwise with yarn and back. And now I'm going to slip one yarn over, purl one, slip one yarn over, brioche purl. Yep. And then I'm going to bring my yarn to the back and slip those last two stitches. That was a moment where I just went on automatic for a second. And now I'm on setup row 4, or we are on setup row 4. So I'm going to slip two purlwise with yarn in front. And now I'm going to slip one yarn over, brioche purl. And slip those last two stitches. And now I'm going to slide to the other end of the needle right here. I'm going to slip those first two stitches over with yarn in front. And now I want to bring my yarn in back, and I'm going to brioche knit, slip one yarn over, brioche knit, slip one yarn over, and then slip those last two stitches with the yarn in front. And make sure when you go to work set up row 5 right here that that contrast color is off to the left again, so it's not getting caught up in the contrast color. Now with setup row 5, we're going to start to elongate that I-cord edge. So I'm going to knit one, and then the next stitch, I'm going to knit one, wrapping the yarn twice. And what that does is make this stitch a little bit bigger to make that edge so it can block out beautifully. And now into the next stitch, I'm going to brioche knit, yarn over, brioche knit, and then I'm going to slip one yarn over, brioche knit. Now I feel like you can start to really see that brioche knit line. And then I'm at the last two stitches right here, and I'm going to knit two together and then knit one. And now I'm going to slide to the other end, and I'm going to slip the first two stitches, dropping that extra wrap. That extra wrap doesn't count as a stitch, but we've elongated that stitch now. And I'm going to bring my yarn to the front, and I'm going to slip one yarn over, purl one, slip one yarn over, brioche purl, slip one yarn over, and slip those last two stitches. And then I'm going to turn my work. You'll see when I turn my work, I've got that slip one yarn over right there. I'm just making sure that the contrast color stays to the left right there. And now I'm on row 6, I believe. How did this happen so fast? I'm going to slip two purlwise with yarn in front. I'm going to brioche purl, slip one yarn over, brioche purl, slip one yarn over, brioche purl, slip those last two stitches, slide to the other end, and now I'm going to slip those two stitches right there, and then I am going to, let me get myself set up, slip one yarn over, brioche knit, slip one yarn over, brioche knit, slip one yarn over, and then slip those last two stitches. And now I'm on row 7. Once we've finished set up row 7 and set up row 8, then we're into the body of Brioche Boomerang, so we're almost there. So now I'm going to knit one, and I'm going to knit one wrapping yarn twice. Showed you how to do that. And now I'm in that increase, so I'm going to brioche knit, yarn over, brioche knit, and then I'm going to slip one yarn over, brioche knit, slip one yarn over, and now I'm at a knit two together right here. Remember, this counts as one stitch. So if I'm getting to the last 3 stitches, then I'm working that knit two together right there, and then that final knit one, and that's the decrease on the left edge. And now I'm going to slide those stitches to the other end of my needle. I'm going to slip 2 purlwise with yarn in back, and then slip one yarn over, purl one, slip one yarn over, brioche purl, slip one yarn over, brioche purl, and bring my yarn to the back and slip those last two stitches. Remembering to keep that contrast color out of the way so it's not getting caught up in the edge. I am suddenly on setup row 8. We're almost done with the setup. I'm going to slip 2 with yarn in front. I'm going to slip 1 yarn over, brioche purl, slip 1 yarn over, brioche purl, slip 1 yarn over, brioche purl, slip those last 2 stitches, and now I'm going to slide to the other end of the needle, slip those first 2 stitches, bring my yarn to the front for a brioche knit, slip 1 yarn over, brioche knit, slip 1 yarn over, brioche knit, slip 1 yarn over, and slip those last 2 stitches. So if we look at this from the front right here, you can see that I have the very start of my brioche boomerang. And what happens there is that I-cord main color comes kind of all the way around the tip right there, which is really lovely. So now that we have worked the beginning, we're going to get into the body, which is actually a 4-row repeat. And we're going to start with the main color. We're going to make sure that that contrast color is to the left and not getting caught up in the edge. And let's go ahead and work these 4 rows together. And then we'll talk about what you need to do when you're almost done with your boomerang. So right here, I am going to knit 1, and I'm going to knit 1 wrapping yarn twice, and then I'm going to brioche knit. Oh, caught myself. Sometimes you'll find that you forget to do the increase, so I really try to remind myself at the beginning. Brioche knit, yarn over, brioche knit into the next stitch right there, into that same stitch, slip 1 yarn over, brioche knit, slip 1 yarn over, brioche knit. I'm to my last 3 stitches, so I'm going to knit 2 together and knit 1. And now I'm going to slide to the other end of my needle, and with my contrast color, I'm going to slip those first 2 stitches, and then I'm going to slip 1 yarn over, purl, slip 1 yarn over, and now I'm going to brioche purl, slip 1 yarn over to the last 2 stitches, bring my yarn to the back, slip those 2 stitches, turn my work. And now I'm on row 2. You can feel the flow of this, right? Now I'm going to slip 2 purlwise with yarn in front. I am going to brioche purl, slip 1 yarn over, brioche purl, slip 1 yarn over, brioche purl, slip 1 yarn over, brioche purl, slip those last 2 stitches, slide to the other end, and now I am going to slip those first 2 stitches, and I am going to do a slip 1 yarn over and brioche knit, slip 1 yarn over, brioche knit, slip 1 yarn over, brioche knit, slip 1 yarn over. Make sure that I get that yarn out of the way right there. Slip those last 2 stitches. Now I am on row 3. Row 3 is very similar to rows 7 and 8 that we already worked, but this is going really quickly. So we're going to knit 1, knit 1 wrapping twice. Now into this next stitch, I'm going to brioche knit, yarn over, brioche knit, and now I'm going to slip 1 brioche knit to the last 3 stitches. Right there, remember the slip 1 yarn over right there, that's 1 stitch, so I'm going to knit 2 together right there, and then I'm going to knit 1, and I'm going to slide to the other end, and I think this is the last pass that I'm going to show you with the contrast color. I'm going to slip 2, dropping the extra wrap. I'm going to slip 1 yarn over, purl 1, slip one yarn over, brioche purl, slip one yarn over, brioche purl, slip one yarn over, brioche purl, bring my yarn to the back, and then slip those last two stitches. And row 4 is the same as row 2, so I don't think there's any reason to show you that. You can slow this video down if you want to watch me doing that more slowly. You can speed it up. I might sound like a chipmunk, but that would be something you could do if you needed to go a little faster, whatever you need to have success. So, what you want to do, and here's a trick that I love, when you think you're starting to run out of yarn, you need just enough of your main color left to work 2 more rows and then the bind off. So, what I like to do as my yarn starts to my balls start to get smaller is I'll weigh my yarn and then I'll work a repeat of rows 1 through 4 and I'll weigh my yarn again. And if I subtract those two numbers, that's how much yarn rows 1 through 4 take. So if I need enough of the main color left to do those final rows and bind off, what I do is take that number and multiply it by 2. Remember, if you do that weighing kind of early on in your shawl, your right side rows are increasing by 1 stitch, so you're going to progressively have more stitches on your needle. So you don't really want to do that weighing until your ball is starting to get smaller to get an idea of how much yarn you need to have left. Just take that number, multiply it by 2. That's what you'll need, and you won't run out. With my junction fiber mill, I ended with 104 stitches on my needle, and I had 3.6 grams of my main color remaining before I went to do the final rows and bind off. So that's a really good segue into let's do the final rows and bind off together. And I have a little shawl right here that we can do that on. Okay, so I'm ready to do the final rows and the bind off. The first thing I'm going to do is cut my CC, leaving about a 6-inch tail because I don't need to worry about that anymore. And I'm just going to be working with my main color. And these last rows are written into the pattern. I'm going to knit 2, and then I'm going to brioche knit, slip 1 yarn over across. I'm not doing any increases or decreases. So I'm just doing the slip 1 yarn over, brioche knit all the way across. Why is brioche so soothing? And then when I get to the last 2 stitches, I'm going to knit those last 2 stitches. I didn't do a decrease on that end. And now I'm on my last row right here, and I'm going to slip 2 with yarn in front. And now I am going to purl 1 and brioche knit across. Whoops, I almost did a slip 1 yarn over just because I'm so used to it. And then I'm going to slip those last 2 stitches. And now what I like to do for the bind off is use my version of Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off, which adds just a little bit of stretch in front of the purl stitches. So the knit stitches, I'm going to work the bind off as usual, where I knit 2 and slip 1 yarn over, slip 1 over, and I'm going to knit 1, slip that stitch over. Now, before I go to do the purl stitch, I'm going to make a yarn over, and then I'm going to slip both the yarn over and the knit stitch over. And what that's going to do in the purl stitches is just give a little bit more elasticity. Now for the knit stitches, I'm not going to use a yarn over. Before the purl stitches, I am going to use a yarn over. So when I slip that over, it's just a little bit more elastic, but it's not too elastic. If I used the traditional Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off, it would have too much stretch to it. I do have a separate video on that if you want to do a deeper dive into that technique. I just wanted to show it to you quickly if you haven't seen it before. So once you're done with that bind off, we get to talk about finishing. Okay, finishing is really easy. You'll end up with four ends to weave in, two at the beginning and two at the very end. What I like to do before I block a project is weave in my ends but not trim them. And then you want to put some warm water with some wool wash into like your bathroom sink, and then you want to give your brioche boomerang a nice soak. If you are working with a farm yarn, your yarn is going to bloom and soften. If you're using a yarn that has maybe like a little bit more tooth than you like, that's what I say for scratchy, you can use a little bit of hair conditioner when you go to block. Just kind of dissolve some hair conditioner into that water, and it'll help your fibers kind of smooth them and lay them down. Just like my hair likes a little bit conditioner to help it smooth and lay down a little bit, right? So you'll just soak it in the water for like 10 or 15 minutes and then squeeze it out gently, wring it out in a towel or two, and just lay it out flat to dry. Remember that brioche is reversible, so you can just throw it around whichever end of your boomerang shows whenever you're wearing it. That is perfect and right on. So I don't normally do this in videos, but I really want to show you how to fix a mistake in brioche. And I learned this trick from Bristol Ivy, and I'm excited to show you how to work it. Okay, I think one of the things that stumps people when they're brioche knitting is when they end up with a situation like this. This is basically a brioche yarn, slip-on yarn over gone wrong, where it just ended up in front of a knit stitch right there, instead of as part of that stitch as the slip-on yarn over. So what I'm going to do is knit across this row, and when we get to this point, I'm gonna ladder down and then show you with the crochet hook how easy that is to fix. It's certainly easier to fix if you catch it before you're like have to ladder down 5 or 6 rows, but I left it there on purpose because I really wanted to show you how simple it is to do. So I am at the beginning of a row right here, and I am going to knit one, and I'm going to knit one wrapping yarn twice. And now this next stitch is going to be an increase stitch. This should be familiar to us all by now. And now I'm going to work a slip-one yarn over brioche knit until I get to that point. Here we are. We just got there. So I'm going to leave that slip-one yarn over right there, and I'm going to just go grab a crochet hook that's a similar size to my knitting needles. And now everybody take a deep breath. I am going to drop that stitch off my left-hand needle, and I'm going to start to ladder down. And I'm just laddering down to my mistake. And I can see that's my stitch that didn't get its slip-one yarn over. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my crochet hook into there, and then I'm going to lay that contrast color over so that I can just go in and grab the main color. And then that is the slip-one yarn over right there. And I'm going to go grab the main color and pull it through, and then make sure I have my slip-one yarn over. And then I'm going to go grab my main color and pull it through. And then I've got my contrast color there again. And now I'm going to go grab my main color and pull it through. And then I want to make sure I get that final slip-one yarn over onto the needle in the end. That's a mistake that you could make, is just kind of like leave that guy and not make sure that it's up on the needle. And since I've got a slip-one yarn over right there, now I'm going to go ahead and brioche knit, slip-one yarn over, and I'm at my last stitches right there, so we know how to work that decrease, and knit the last stitch. And let's just look at how beautiful that fix was. It went to from funky to beautiful in 1 second. So that's an easy way to fix a mistake in brioche knitting. Please let me know if you have any other questions. I know my friend Patty Lyons has a class on fixing brioche mistakes that's like a very deep dive into that. So if that's something that you want to learn, I would highly suggest checking that out. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to see your brioche boomerangs come to life. Please do ask any questions. If you enjoyed this video, I'd love if you subscribed to my channel, got on my newsletter, kept an eye on what I'm up to next. I love learning and teaching, and most of all, I really love knitting with you. Happy knitting.